Space is the most beautiful thing the human eye has ever seen. And the most deadly. No air, no sound. Temperatures that drop to minus 270 degrees. Radiation that passes through metal like it isn't there. And if something goes wrong, and something always goes wrong, you are hundreds of thousands of miles from the nearest help. And yet humans went anyway, climbed into tin cans smaller than your bathroom, strapped themselves to controlled explosions, and pointed themselves at the sky. Today, we count down the 10 most dangerous space missions ever attempted. These are real missions, real astronauts, real moments where the entire world held its breath. Let's begin. Top 10. Vostok 1. The first human in space. April 12, 1961. 1961, a 27-year-old Soviet Air Force pilot named Yuri Gagarin climbs into a capsule the size of a small car. He has very little control over what happens next. Almost everything is automated. The Soviets weren't even sure a human mind could function properly in space. Some scientists genuinely believe that weightlessness might cause insanity. There is an override code on board in case Gagarin loses his mind and tries to take manual control. They gave him the code anyway, sealed in an envelope, just in case he remains sane enough to need it. The rocket fires. Gagarin says quietly, almost to himself, "Poyekali. Let's go." He orbits the Earth once. 108 minutes. Then re-enters the atmosphere in a fireball. His capsule has no landing rockets. He ejects at 7 kilometers and parachutes down into a field in Russia, where a farmer and her daughter stare at him in complete confusion. Gagarin smiles at them and says, "I'm a friend. Comrades, don't be afraid." He became the first human being to go to space, against odds that no one fully admitted at the time. 9. Gemini 8. Spinning out of control. March 16, 1966. Gemini 8. Astronauts Neil Armstrong and David Scott successfully dock with an unmanned target vehicle in orbit, the first docking in space history. It is a triumph. For about 30 seconds. Then the spacecraft begins to roll, slowly at first. Then, faster. Then, completely out of control. A stuck thruster on the Gemini capsule is firing continuously, and there is nothing they can do to stop it from inside. The spin reaches 1 revolution per second. The astronauts are on the edge of losing consciousness. At that speed, the blood begins to drain from the brain. Blackout, then death. That is where this is heading. Armstrong makes a decision in seconds. He shuts down the entire main thruster system, all 16 thrusters, and fires the re-entry control thrusters instead. It works. The spin slows. Stops. The mission is cut short. They splash down early. But both men are alive. 3 years later, Neil Armstrong would walk on the moon. But this, a quiet Tuesday afternoon spinning to death above the Earth, was the day that almost ended everything. 8. Apollo 1. The fire on the Launchpad. January 27, 1967-7. The most heartbreaking entry on this list, because these 3 men never made it to space at all. January 27, 1967, astronauts Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee are inside the Apollo 1 command module on the Launchpad at Cape Canaveral. It is a routine test. Pre-launch rehearsal. Nobody expected anything to go wrong. At 6:31 in the evening, Grissom's voice comes over the radio. "Fire. I smell fire." 2 seconds later, fire in the cockpit. The capsule is filled with pure oxygen at high pressure. It is essentially a sealed room full of fuel. The fire spreads in seconds, not minutes. Seconds. The hatch designed to open inward is held shut by the very pressure of the fire burning inside. It takes rescuers 5 minutes to open it from the outside. 5 minutes that felt, as one technician described, like the longest 5 minutes of my life. All 3 astronauts were gone. Their deaths changed everything. NASA stopped, redesigned the capsule from scratch, changed the atmosphere, changed the hatch, changed the procedures. Apollo went on. The moon was reached. But Grissom, White, and Chaffee never got to see it. They gave the mission its chance to succeed with their lives. 7. Apollo 12. Struck by lightning. November 14, 1969, 36 seconds after liftoff. The Saturn V rocket carrying Apollo 12 is struck by lightning. The entire capsule loses power. Warning lights flood the cockpit. Alarms everywhere. Mission Control in Houston sees all their data go dead simultaneously. Then, 12 seconds later, lightning strikes again. In the cockpit, astronaut Pete Conrad is dealing with more warning lights than any training ever prepared him for. Guidance system offline. Fuel cells offline. Platform tumbling. A young flight controller in Houston named John Aaron remembers seeing this exact pattern in a simulation months earlier. He tells Mission Control try C to aux. It is an obscure switch setting that almost nobody knows. Astronaut Alan Bean finds it. Flips it. Power comes back. Systems reset. The mission continues. Apollo 12 goes on to land successfully on the moon. Pete Conrad becomes the third human to walk on the lunar surface. But for a few seconds, 36 seconds after launch, a rocket hit by lightning twice was somehow still going up. 6. Soyuz 11. The only deaths in space. June 30, 1971. This is the only mission in history where astronauts died in space. Not on the launch pad. Not during re-entry. In space. In the silence. Soviet cosmonauts Georgy Dobrovolsky, Vladislav Volkov, and Viktor Patsayev had spent 23 days aboard the Salyut 1 space station, a record at the time. The mission was a triumph. The return was perfect. The capsule landed exactly on target. Recovery crews opened the hatch. All three men were in their seats, eyes closed, looking completely peaceful, as if they were simply asleep. They were not asleep. A pressure equalization valve had opened too early during re-entry, venting the air from the capsule in seconds. At an altitude where the outside air is nothing, the crew had no spacesuits on. There was nothing to be done. Medical reports estimated they lost consciousness within 15 seconds. The Soviet Union went silent for 3 days. Then announced, cosmonauts Dobrovolsky, Volkov, and Patsayev will be remembered forever. They were. And they are. 5. Space Shuttle Challenger. 73 seconds. January 28, 1986. January 28, 1986. It is unusually cold at Cape Canaveral, Florida. Engineers had warned that the rubber O-rings on the solid rocket boosters were not designed to function in freezing temperatures. Their warnings were overruled. The launch proceeded. 7 astronauts climb aboard. Among them, Krista McAuliffe, a high school teacher from New Hampshire, the first civilian ever selected to go to space. Her students are watching live from their classroom. Challenger lifts off at 11:38 in the morning. 73 seconds later, it is gone. An O-ring on the right solid rocket booster had failed in the cold. Hot gas leaked through. It reached the external fuel tank. And that was the end. The shuttle broke apart at an altitude of 15 kilometers, moving at nearly 2,000 kilometers per hour. Millions watched it happen live on television, including those children in that classroom. All 7 crew members were lost. NASA was grounded for 32 months. And the world learned again what happens when warnings are not listened to. 4. Mir collision. Station in crisis. June 25, 1997. The Russian space station Mir, 1997, orbiting 250 kilometers above the Earth. The plan, a cosmonaut manually guides an unmanned supply ship called Progress M34 to dock with Mir. It sounds straightforward. It is not. Cosmonaut Vasily Sibliev is watching through a blurry video feed with a 10-second delay. The supply ship is moving faster than expected. He cannot judge the distance properly. Progress M34 strikes Mir. It hits the Spectre module, punches a hole in the solar panel, begins depressurizing the station. The crew, including American astronaut Mike Foley, can hear the air escaping. They seal off the damaged module and lose 25% of their power. The station begins to drift, losing attitude. Solar panels no longer pointing at the sun. For 48 hours, 3 people on a crippled space station in orbit fought to save it. They succeeded. But Mir was never the same again. It was deorbited 4 years later, deliberately brought back through the atmosphere, and buried in the Pacific Ocean. In pieces. 3 Space Shuttle Columbia, coming home February 1, 2003. February 1, 2003, the Space Shuttle Columbia is coming home after a 16-day science mission. During launch, a briefcase-sized piece of foam had broken off the external fuel tank and struck the leading edge of Columbia's left wing. NASA engineers raised concerns. They were told the foam strike had happened before on other missions with no serious consequences. The mission continued. What nobody knew or chose to fully investigate was that the foam had punched a hole in the thermal protection tiles on the wing. Those tiles are the only thing standing between the crew and temperatures of 1,400 degrees during re-entry. At 8:59 in the morning, Columbia begins re-entry over the Pacific Ocean. At 8:59 and 32 seconds, Mission Control notices the temperature sensors in the left wing going silent. One by one, in sequence. At 9:02, the last communication from Columbia. Then, nothing. People across Texas and Louisiana looked up and saw streaks of light crossing the sky. They thought it was a meteor shower. It was Columbia. Breaking apart. All 7 crew members were lost. NASA investigator Pamela Melroy said afterwards the crew was doing everything they were trained to do. They were doing everything right. The shuttle program flew 3 more times after Columbia, then retired forever in 2011. To Apollo 13, Houston, we've had a problem. April 13, 1970. This is the greatest survival story in the history of space exploration. April 13, 1970, Apollo 13 is 56 hours into its mission, 200,000 miles from Earth, on its way to the moon. Astronauts Jim Lovell, Jack Swigert, and Fred Heise are asked to perform a routine procedure: stir the oxygen tanks. Swigert flips the switch. A bang shakes the spacecraft. The number 2 oxygen tank, already damaged by overheating during pre-launch testing. Already essentially a bomb waiting for a spark, explodes. It blows an entire panel off the side of the service module. Oxygen is venting into space. Power is failing. 2 of 3 fuel cells are dead. Lovell looks out the window and sees gas escaping into space. He understands immediately what this means. He gets on the radio. Houston, we've had a problem. The lunar landing is abandoned. The only goal now is staying alive. The crew moves into the lunar module, a small spacecraft designed for 2 people for 2 days. 3 people need to survive in it for 4 days. Power is cut to almost nothing. The temperature inside drops to 4 degrees Celsius. The astronauts cannot sleep from the cold. Carbon dioxide builds up. Engineers on the ground design a makeshift filter, using only items available on the spacecraft: cardboard, plastic bags, and tape. They talk the crew through building it by hand. They use the moon's gravity to slingshot back toward Earth, a technique nobody had ever used in an emergency before. On April 17, 6 days after launch, the capsule splashes down in the Pacific Ocean. All 3 men alive. NASA flight director Gene Kranz said 3 words that became famous: failure is not an option. He was right. It wasn't. And because of that, 3 men came home from the impossible. #1 Vostok 2, the spacewalk that almost killed everything. March 18, 1965. And it earns that position not because of one thing that went wrong, but because of everything. March 18, 1965, Soviet cosmonaut Alexei Leonov steps outside his spacecraft. He becomes the first human being to walk in open space. 12 minutes outside, floating above the Earth. It is one of the most extraordinary moments in human history. Then it is time to come back inside. And Leonov cannot get back in. His spacesuit has inflated in the vacuum of space, puffed up like a balloon. It is now too large to fit through the airlock hatch. He tries. Again. He cannot get in. He is beginning to overheat. His gloves are filling with sweat. His body temperature is rising. He has minutes before heat exhaustion. Then unconsciousness. Then death. He makes a decision that goes against every training protocol. He releases pressure from his own suit, deflating it manually, risking decompression sickness, and forces himself headfirst into the airlock. He gets in. He survives. But the mission is not over. During re-entry, the automated landing system fails. The cosmonauts take manual control another risk. They land not in the planned zone, but deep in a frozen Siberian forest. In the middle of winter, wolves circling outside. It takes rescue teams 2 days to reach them by ski through the snow. Leonov and his crewmate Belyayev spent a night inside a spacecraft buried in a Siberian forest, listening to wolves, waiting to be found. He was asked years later whether he was afraid during the spacewalk. He said, "I was not afraid. I was concentrated." That is what all of them were. Every mission on this list, not fearless, concentrated. Facing the impossible, one problem at a time. 10 missions. 10 moments where the universe reminded us how small we are. And 10 moments where humans refused to accept that answer. We lost brave people to the sky. People who knew the risks. Who climbed in anyway. Who said, "Let's go." And because of them, every mission that came after was a little safer. Every rocket a little smarter. Every astronaut a little better prepared. Which mission shocked you the most? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. If this video gave you chills, subscribe. New videos every week. And the next one is already right there waiting for you. See you in the next one.